Nigerians continue to experience difficulties in accessing new notes. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo has urged major players in the fintech space to explore more possible ways of mitigating the current difficulties that Nigerians are encountering. During a virtual interactive session with a number of fintech investors and ecosystem players, the Vice President said that the Central Bank of Nigeria and commercial banks should work with all fintechs that have mobile money agents, not just some of them, in order to reach the farthest places in the country. Now, of course, on the Naira redesign and scarcity of banknotes, here is the central bank governor again from that press release, this time talking about alternative channels.
We would like to encourage the public to use alternative channels as much as possible for their transactions and hold minimal cash in line with the cashless policy.
Tweet on the matter has raised some interest. Let's take a look at that tweet now, where someone was making that same call, saying fintech today, fintech tomorrow. Nobody is able to build an infrastructure system to rival NIBS and provide redundancy. All of you want to build savings, investments, and diaspora remittance apps only. So it's not just the vice president calling on fintech, but is that question even accurate? Now, this led to an in-depth thread from Benjamin Dada. He's a fintech and startup consultant, publisher of the very popular BenjaminDaDaDotCom. He joins us now from London. Benjamin, good morning to you, and thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. So, as I said, you had this very viral, in-depth thread on how NIBS works. That's the Nigeria Interbank Settlement System. Let's talk through it. Can we start off with the, which you addressed in your thread, the e-payment functions of NIBS, and then let's get into whether or not the infrastructure can be robust enough to accommodate more payments. So Benjamin, you're welcome. Go right ahead.
All right, thank you so much, Rotus. Big fan of your show. So yes, like I spoke in my thread, NIBS acts as the Nigeria central switch, right? So at the foundation, they provide that infrastructure to switch transactions between issuers and acquirers, and some of the sub-services that they offer are some of the things I listed in that thread. One is instant payments. So the NIBS instant payment is called NIP. So that's like the most popular, and even globally, right? It's like the most popular instant payment solution for transferring money and receiving funds in real time, right? A second popular infrastructure on that central switch is their work in payment terminal service aggregation. It's the reason why I can use my GT Bank card on a Providus POS, right? They act as the aggregator for all of the PTSPs, who in this case are the ones that can issue the terminals, right? But they sit at that super level to facilitate transactions and interoperability. Those are two major functions they perform on that central switch foundation. Now, but they also do other things, right? For the CBN and for the bankers committee. So they act as a technology provider or a technology thought partner for the FSI space. Thank you.
All right, great. Now, just to be clear, the central switch infrastructure is handled by NIBS, yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. So if that's the case, then the Nigeria Instant Payments has the buy-in from the banks, which allow, as you said, POS transactions and bank transfers and the like to be facilitated, yes?
So that's something I want to clarify.
Okay.
Right. So the central switch has a product called NIP. That one focuses more on just account-to-account transfers, right? The one that allows for, payment terminal transactions. So a payment terminal is any hardware that you can carry out payment. So a POS device is a terminal, an ATM is a terminal. So that's the one that facilitates, POS-like transactions. So NIP and, PTSA or PTSP, which is like the payment terminal, are two separate things, but on the same foundation or central switch infrastructure.
Perfect. So now, let's get to what's been the talk of the town now. If the payment infrastructure is overwhelmed, as we have seen, what needs to be done? I don't know if we can use the analogy of highway traffic. If traffic is too much, or a road has been closed, which is the cash, and now all the traffic is going towards another road, which is the electronic payments, and now there's overload and there's too much traffic. Is it to build another road? How that foundation which you've talked about now, the switch foundation, what needs to happen to expand that, and whose responsibility is that?
Okay, I think the first thing is to address the assumption that the payment infrastructure is overwhelmed. So if you think about it, last year or like 2021, we processed more than 3.4 billion NIP transactions in terms of count. And by my count last year, and using NIPS data, we had 5.1 billion transactions on NIP, and NIP did not break. NIP's failure rate is 0.7%, right? So the first assumption that the payment infrastructure is overwhelmed is something that we need to, address at some point. But in terms of whether, we need to build another infrastructure, I would say that, competition or just not having a single point of failure or, redundancy in whatever sense is definitely encouraging the market for consumers' benefit. But I don't think, it's a problem that NIPS itself can't solve. Like when you want to step up your server capacity, it's a very small addition to your tech rack or your architecture. So it's not like, the infrastructure was overwhelmed and everything collapsed. I think the problem with payments is that the value chain involves so many players. So it's almost hard to know which of the players has a downtime. So if sometimes your bank will tell you, oh, this provider is down, sometimes they don't tell you, but they are the ones that are down, right? So I think because of how many players are in that payments value chain, before you send money and get money, they're like 5 players, right? If you do a POS transaction, they're like 4 players. So that makes it convoluted and nobody really knows what the cost of a downtime or what the cost of a failure is, because it can be even a consumer failure like insufficient funds, right? It can be an intra-bank failure like maybe your API is not connecting or like maybe you have a downtime, or it can be NIPS and NIP itself. But like I just told you, that fraction is usually small, right? So I don't think it's really a case of, oh, let's all go build another NIPS. And then second thing is, if you're going to take that endeavor, it's a very serious commitment, serious investment. And I think, that's a question for another day.
Gotcha. So at this point, what if there's too many players or too many too many players in the value chain? Yeah. So, what then needs to happen? Do you have to take a look at the system to where you reduce the amount of players in there, and then doesn't that impact the system overall? Because if you reduce the players, then you have less buying from those in the financial sector that are adding to the operability of the system itself.
So I would say that, the first thing is to expand capacity, right, from the current provider that we have. And I know that, from my contacts in the NIPS team, they expand this, they do observability and monitoring, right? And then they step up server capacity as needed. So that's one. But the second thing is that there are actually other payment switches that offer like fund transfer services. And that might be the case why in some cases or in some banks, there was no downtime, right? So remember I told you that if the actual cost of a failure was based on the API leg to move the money, right? If you're using somebody else, yours might still be up. So there are indeed a couple of switches or payment systems or payment service providers that facilitate funds transfer without the NIP infrastructure. So if you think about it, if you look at the CBN's website, the oversight page, there's like 13 companies who have switching licenses and can facilitate funds transfer. But the catch is that NIPS is still like the switch of switches, right? It has access to the CBN's RTGS system. So, I think, yes, let's have a couple of people that have these switching licenses, let them do more with their licenses, let them, go the full gambit. But again, we're still back to NIPS because they are the ones that are talking directly to the bank accounts in the CBN. And that's also because the CBN is trying to probably reduce the number of points of failure from their end. They don't want to expose too many endpoints in that sense. So, increase capacity for NIPS, but also have the other switches, keep running, keep doing business. They have to figure out adoption. Like I told you in that thread, or like I told everyone, NIPS has the backing of policy and adoption, which is something every fintech always has to think about. They have robust compliance teams, but in this case for NIPS, like CBN is like a compliance team. They make the rules, and NIPS can be well in bed with CBN to sort out compliance. But then when it now looks at the adoption, it's a simple directive. Everybody needs to implement Naira, everybody needs to implement Afrigo, everybody needs to implement this in the financial ecosystem. So NIBS benefits from that advantage, but then we still need the other switches and the other payments service providers to keep running and keep improving their business. So yeah, I think it is what it is.
Yeah. It's a heavy topic. That's why we called on you to talk to us about this. And again, that thread, encourage everybody to go on Twitter and read that thread. Very quickly, internet access. I know we've got a couple minutes to go. I want you to please comment on Starlink. There's been a number of folks who are saying it's good. So where does internet play into all this? And what do you make of Starlink making inroads into Nigeria?
Thank you. Again, I'm a big fan of an open market for competition. I think what Starlink is going to enable us to do as a country is give 100% coverage from a broadband point of view. Now, when you think about the kind of coverage for internet we've had before, you think about 2G, 3G, 4G. In Africa as a whole, 3G is still the dominant 56% coverage. If you look at GSMA's data from 2020, right? 4G is picking up, but we see that 3G has peaked. So 3G is the kind of internet connectivity that usually pass through cellular devices, so your mobile phones, etc. But from a broadband point of view, Starlink allows even the remotest of locations. So far, you have access to the sky, to get some internet access. So I think one is we'll see more people in hinterlands or very rural areas where it's expensive to set up a base station that telcos typically do, or where it's not just commercially viable to do your regular telco business in that space, so Starlink provides that coverage. But on the second end, Starlink provides adequate competition in terms of delivery, the speed of their offering, and the cost. So when you think about the subscription cost for Starlink, it's actually cheaper than some ISPs unlimited that everybody knows is not unlimited because there's a fair use policy, right? So that competition will make this ISP step up either their pricing or look to invest more in the infrastructure. But the final thing is the drawback that Starlink might have is, how they collect payments today. So, even though they try to display and I did a thread on that as well, even though they try to display the amount in Naira, right? They're asking you to pay. You can't pay with a Naira card right now. I couldn't pay with a Naira card. I don't know anybody that's paid with a Naira card. You have to pay with a dollar card. So you're either paying with a foreign dollar card or a domiciliary account. So I have a UBA domiciliary account, so I can use that card to pay for Starlink. So first of all, that payment accessibility problem, they need to solve that. But the second thing is, until Starlink gets more adoption or begins to be produced en masse, the cost will not drop. So right now it's about $600. So $600 to someone on the streets is almost 400,000 Naira. Right, that's a lot of commitment to put, but I mean, people are willing to save up for it if that value is guaranteed. But I think the cost of the first infrastructure and the payment accessibility is something that they need to solve. But I think they would also begin to look at BNPL as a way to make people adopt Starlink. So
gotcha. And BNPL is buy now, pay later, right?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Hey, Benjamin, it has been fantastic having you on. Thank you so much for the insight. Benjamin Dada, Fintech startup consultant, also the publisher of BenjaminDaDaDotCom. Thank you so much for your time.